Hey, what's going on, everyone? How's it going? It's Banner and Backbone. We are here for Palantalk. I'm Nick Paro, co-founder here at Banner and Backbone, joined by my good friend Shane Yirak, still not my son,
Still not your
um,
son.
though I'd be
I didn't
proud if he
change it.
was. Though
I
I would
was
be proud if he was.
absolutely. Here's the thing. I'm going to leave it this episode because I forgot it. But I also want to emphasize that I'm still not your son because there's an extra L in there that I missed. Um, I will for today be an independent analyst, but also not your son.
And
So
now I'm Nick Paro, not your dad,
there
joined
you go.
by Shane Yirak, not your son, to give you some political analysis of what's going on in the world. Hey, everybody, welcome. How's it going? I'm going to try and pull up our link here on Substack as well. Substack has been changing shit, so it's hard to find all the
Substack is
stuff.
changing a lot, and I think that's an
Yeah.
important thing to note. There's
Oh,
a lot.
you got to go back to your invite from yesterday. That's in your email and
Oh, is it
accept
not?
it.
Did it not
Because
go?
one of the things that Substack changed was you can no longer find co-host invites on the live stream events unless it's a stream event that you scheduled right then and there. And so they took away the ability to find our co-host invites, so it's harder. So once Shane is able to find it and accept, his name should pop up.
I
There he
did.
is.
I
He's
did.
now on here with us. Welcome everybody. As now all the names are on here for us. I'm Nick Paro, not your dad, joined by Shane Yirak, still not your son, for Palantalk. Today is going to be a discussion on bomb first and ask no questions.
Yep.
Um,
The
so
strategy or the lack thereof, right?
yeah,
That's a lot of what the discussion is right now. It's a lot of what people, particularly analysts and in the space, are trying to kind of figure out is like, what's the plan? And I have my theories. I can tell you guys what I think. I'm not an expert. I just pay attention to a lot of things and I try and draw conclusions based on what I have, make a hypothesis, test it against real time events. And that's how we can really just do our best to kind of make sense of everything that's going on right now. But, I just do want to emphasize that if you've read my articles or what we say here today, like we're talking about a war that's happening right now. Like something could happen tomorrow that changes the entire dynamic of the conflict. So like when we're saying we're doing this day by day, hour by hour, it really is a day by day, hour by hour thing. So I do just kind of want to preface that because we're going to talk about a lot of things today, but I don't
hmm,
want anyone to walk away saying, "Oh, I know what's going on," like because I do present facts. I do present the things I think in the way that they make sense to me. But also, like, I will never claim to be right. I will claim to identify a pattern that I think is happening. Um, but I just kind of wanted to add that preface as well before we got
yeah,
into this conversation.
yeah. And Shane, you've been doing a lot of really good reporting on everything that's going on in the war, or I guess our terrorism in the Middle East. And I do smaller updates. I try and do at least a single daily update around the last 24 hours of the war. And I have been starting to give at the bottom of it, here's my guess of what might happen,
Mm-hmm.
and or here's my understanding of why this might be important. And I think that helps because I don't want to claim that this is the answer, just like Shane doesn't claim this is the answer. It's this is probably the answer and here's why, or here's this is probably what's going to happen and here's why. Like Shane, you were doing a lot of reporting on the Houthis and how they had stayed out of it, and that them entering could mark an escalation phase
Yeah.
this in all of this. And over the weekend, the Houthis entered the fray.
It's a big
And
deal.
first
Very
things
big
that
deal.
one of the first things that I put out about it was the Houthis are primed to close the Red Sea and another strait within the area, and that would close off two of the most important global shipping lanes and would dramatically fuck over the economy of pretty much every European and Western nation. And that's the point. And I want to make sure I emphasize that is that's the point, is it will hurt a ton of people's economies. And it's our fault. It's the US's fault that world economies are being smashed, that world economies are getting hurt, that the fertilizer industry and the agriculture industry, 30% of the world fertilizer comes through the Strait of Hormuz. And guess what? That ain't open. That's going to affect our national security here at home because food production is a national security issue. Health of your population is a national security issue. Education for your population is a national security issue. The environmental damage that nobody is fucking talking about is a national security issue. And guess what? We just made all of those worse. We just lessened our security. And from what I heard over the weekend too, was there's reports that the FBI is again downplaying or preventing information coming out around counterterrorism and events that may happen within the US. And I just want to make sure my thought and analysis, and this is not truth, this is not what will happen, this is what I think may happen. And I'll preface that I think this may happen, is the thing we need to worry about most, because we know Donald Trump wants to bomb his enemies. That's his way of doing things, is if he doesn't get what he wants, he bombs. Well, he said the Ayatollah is dead, and the next enemies are the Democrats in the states. My fear, and this is my speculation, is that we need to watch out for a false flag event, which is where Donald Trump and his regime will drop a bomb in the US, a literal bomb somewhere in the US, claim that the Iranians did it without any evidence, without any follow-up, without any investigation. And we need to be prepared as a people to say no. There needs to be thorough, quick investigation of what happened. There's going to be, in my opinion, a false flag event.
Yeah.
More than an Iranian sleeper cell. I'm more worried about Trump bombing us than Iran bombing us, because Iran doesn't want to get rid of Trump. They see him as our Hitler. They see him as a liability to the United States. He is. And he's going to cause more damage, more death, and more destruction in this process, especially with, all the troops heading over to the Middle East and staging to take Karg Island, which is a stupid fucking idea. Shane, your thoughts?
So many ways. First thing I sent a video in the chat. It kind of plays into what you're doing, because I want to talk about why I agree with you and why I don't think Iran is going to hit us. Okay. Because I actually think it doesn't play into their strategy. It doesn't work within their strategy. Their strategy is, I said in an article, it's brilliant. I'm viewing this from a tactical lens. I'm not viewing this from, I like the Ayatollah, the regime. I actually shared a piece this morning written by Yalda Rashan. I'm pretty sure that's how I say it. I'll double check. But she was writing about, she's been sharing information with me for months about the the Iranian resistance. She was talking to me and sharing things in regards to the protests, what was going on, what's happening to women over there. And she actually put out a piece today about how this war has pretty much effectively crushed that resistance for the time being. Using wartime powers, Iran has been able to militarize the state, arrest who they need to, and pretty much suppress resistance. So it actually war benefits the oppressor domestically, is where the first thing I want to talk about here, to your point. But the other thing is, I shared a video with Nick, and we're going to play it here in a second. And it's kind of funny, but the point isn't that it's funny. It's that it's propaganda, but it's made for us, and it targets us. And the goal is to make us, who already hate our government, hate the government more. My theory is Iran doesn't want to fight the United States. They want the United States gone. They want to run the Middle East. They have shown the Gulf states, the entire GCC, they have shown everybody that the dollar might be leverage, but the dollar means nothing if the petrodollar can't leave. And that's where you're seeing the broader strategy. And it's multifaceted, it's multi-front, and we're just going to watch this video.
And let's make sure we are very clear. This is a propaganda video from Iran.
This is Iranian propaganda.
And I'm going to actually put on the lower third of our screen. Oh,
yes.
I'll be back in a few minutes.
No, someone didn't make this. This is not an interior, U.S. This is Iran and their intelligence / propaganda agency. And this is for the whole world to see.
Let me make sure I spell propaganda right.
They have so much propaganda, we don't even know how to spell it anymore. Wait.
Okay. I'm going to put up this disclaimer on the bottom corner here. This is an Iranian propaganda video.
Iranian propaganda.
Just remember, this is Iranian propaganda. We are showing this to you because it is important to see, not that we believe or care to listen to Iranian propaganda, but they are doing some interesting things and they are pointing out stuff that we already know. They're pointing out stuff,
and it's worth watch what they point out.
Yeah, it's
from
worth,
a perspective of creating an enemy for everyone else to see, right? You want to think, if you're trying to turn the world against a country, watch this video and see what they choose to highlight in this video.
Yeah. And it's important for us to see it because we also need to understand what other nations are doing, saying, or putting out about us. We used to have soft power where we could effectively combat this, but now we can't because our soft power is gone in the world. And so because, our government believes the only idea is bomb first, ask no questions, which, by the way, is terrorism. If you're just going to bomb and not ask questions or bomb and not do anything else, that's an act of terrorism. And so let's watch this video real quick. It's about 1.5 minutes, and then we'll be back from it.
Probably had mixed feelings watching that, chat. I'm sure. That was the goal. This is good propaganda. This is really, really good propaganda. If the United States was running this kind of propaganda, MAGA would be successful. This is real, functionally effective propaganda. It made me, when I watched it, they did massacre the Indians. Yeah, they do. They're still lynching black people. Yeah, they're still doing all of these things. Yeah, they are covering up the Epstein files. Yeah, they did kill 160 children in Manab. These are not, they're taking what America has done and they're just, this is what America is. And then you look at it from that perspective, they have not only shattered the illusion of American military dominance, right? One of the first things I wrote when this war started was a hypothetical scenario where the Gerald R. Ford is sunk by the
But at least we don't have to worry about that, because it seems like somebody set a fire on it, and
dude, do you know exactly what was damaged?
it was well, at first it started in the laundry area, but now it looks like it's going to take 2 years to repair the aircraft carrier. Somebody sabotaged that. That was an intentional act, and I am not mad about it.
No, it saved the lives of those soldiers or sailors.
I think so, yeah.
So
I think so.
Because
I believe that, because they're no longer in harm's way and they're no longer going to be the target of a drone swarm, because Iran is going to take out some of our Navy because we just put it there for easy targets. And if we take Karg Island, we're going to lose a lot of people.
How do they, and before we go farther into that, because there's so much to talk about there.
Yeah, let's get back to this video before we digress too far off the video.
Yeah. And so the Fords in there, they touch on everything that they're going to do too. They let the world know the dollar. They collapse the Statue of Liberty, symbolic. That's freedom. That's the end of they're saying America, liberty, our freedom collapsing. Okay. Symbolic. You might not catch that, but your brain does. It's all subliminal messaging. The dollar is burning. It's cracking. Symbolic. This is what Iran is doing. They're destroying the dollar. They're pointing out that America is not a country that's driven by liberty or justice for all. They're showing that the United Nations has failed to actually curtail this country, the United States. It's pointed, it's accurate, and it's effective. Because guess what? And I caution anyone against rooting for Iran. Do not root for Iran. Do not root for the United States. Do not cheer on a side in war, particularly this war. These are both oppressive and violent regimes, and Israel is an army of genociding Zionists who are now trying to, they're actively bulldozing every single home behind their front line in Lebanon. They advance, and then they bulldoze the village behind it. They are actively using the Gaza model in Lebanon. They are actively trying to annex an entire portion of southern Lebanon. Okay, so like this is not even something that in all of this, right? They're saying that these are bad people and we are going to destroy them. That's the message. That's the message. Why did they choose Legos? Because they fall apart, but also because they can get through something very serious, very violent, in a way that's not off-putting, in a way that Americans are going to receive, in a way that Americans see, well, Iran is trying to avenge the Native Americans. We also support the Native Americans, but they don't. What they want is regime change. What they want is regime change. It's worth noting that if they want regime change, it's interesting
I'll push back on that. I don't think they really want regime change in the U.S. because, like I said earlier, Donald Trump is our Hitler to them. And just like the Allied forces did not want to remove Hitler at some point until the end, because he made it worse for Germany and he made Germans awake. He woke Germans up to the plight that they were under. And no, again, I don't believe that Iran cares about.
They don't. To be clear, they do not.
The first world people or the First Nations people. Sorry, they don't care about women and children in the U.S. They are using this as propaganda to wake us up to care about it. Because we can. The only ones who are going to make regime change in the U.S. are staters. It's us. It's people from the states. We're the only ones who can force regime change. a lot of other countries don't actually care if we change our regime because it makes us weaker. Donald Trump inherently has made us weaker, less secure, less viable as a nation, not a good trading partner, not an ally. We are just a pariah. Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and Stephen Miller and Russell Vought and the Project 2025 and all of them have made us less safe. And Iran is playing on that. And no, I don't root for Iran. Just like Shane said, you don't root for a side on this war. This is not a good war. This is terrorism. And we should probably stop even calling it a war. This is US terrorism against the Middle East because we went in to just blow things up and then leave. Like Donald Trump wanted the pictures and that was it. He doesn't plan for anything future. War like real conflict requires a leader who's willing to self-reflect and self-evaluate and say, oh shit, we're doing something wrong. We need to go a different path. Donald Trump cannot do that. He's a narcissistic sycophant and a fucking Putin lackey who's doing all of this to, yes, grift and genocide, but it's also a Russian play to destroy America from within because Donald Trump is a Russian asset. Willing or unwilling, witting or unwitting, doesn't matter. He is a Russian asset who is actively destroying the American economy, destroying American safety, hurting American lives, costing us billions of dollars. And Iran knows that if they can continue doing what they're doing, and the US continues wasting money and power on war efforts, we will bankrupt and break ourselves. And that's part of what that propaganda was saying, was we will bankrupt and break ourselves. And the fracturing of the White House, the fracturing of the monuments, those were symbolic of what is actually going on in the US. They're just putting a label on it. And just remember, what we watched was propaganda. You have to take all propaganda through a lens of bias. And we are not believing that Iran cares about us. We're just pointing out that they're putting truth about what is going on in the US. And whether we like it or not, we should probably look at it, take a look at it through very, very, very clear eyes wide open, saying, this is propaganda. I have to be careful that the bias in this is not for our betterment. Iran wants death to America. They've said that many a times. They're not our friends. I do not like the Iranian government, and I do not like the US government because they're an authoritarian police state government that wants to destroy our freedoms. Yeah, this is a regime war. This is not, this is about billionaires and the pedo class and making profits. This is not about making us safer. This is not about stabilizing the world. This is about expanding US influence of pedophilia and crypto, Israeli influence of pedophilia and crypto and destruction, and to bolster the Russian economy.
It's a big deal, right? And why is Russia, and that's actually kind of a good point to kind of mention that, is there's absolutely no question that Russia is providing ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, okay? I'm going to point out, if you guys read my updates, you know that a E3 Sentinel AWACS was destroyed. And they report everything damaged. When they say it's damaged, it's blown up. Okay, so first thing I want to point out, if you haven't read my work or kind of watched, kind of, you know, seen what Nick is saying and other people who are more dialed in on what's going on, they are lying about everything, just about everything. They are not being transparent. The IDF is not being transparent. They say nothing has happened. Hezbollah says they've blown up 21 tanks. We see Chinese satellite footage of burning tanks and burning planes because China's been putting it all out there for us to watch. I look at it every day. It's not. Yeah,
this is probably one of the most visible wars there are because there's so much satellite imagery coming out of that area, and people are just focusing satellites there. Nations are just like, hey, let's just see what's going on and expose it.
Chinese commercial satellite companies, I'm sure Beijing went to them and said, Go.
Because they want America to have, Donald Trump is an asset for foreign nations who are not our allies. He is a traitor to this nation. He is acting in traitorous ways. He is aiding and abetting our enemies. We have reasonable suspicion that he is providing intelligence to the Russians, which is then coming back to Iran to hurt and kill our soldiers and service members and destroy our assets. Part of the reason Iran and say Russia want this is because it'll force the US out of the region. If they can really blow up enough of our bases, cause enough issues, they will force us out of the Middle East. We will collapse in on ourselves. We will be an international pariah by ourselves. And when we do collapse in on ourselves, then more chaos in the US. And that's part of the plan.
And so here's a big point I want to make. If we know the plan, make your own plan. If you know that there's a certain pressure on a system, okay? I'm going to refer to the United States as a system because it is. You can dumb anything down to whatever. It's a system. It's a bunch of people in a bunch of different organizations, governments, municipalities that all interact with each other, okay? We have a two-party system. We have a very divided country. But we also have universal suffering, something that is made possible by this war, which wasn't happening before. And it's worth noting, and I said this from day one, this is my take. I don't think the United States, the population here, is motivated enough to succeed in regime change without external pressure. Now, my hope was that external pressure would come from Europe and trade and not acquiescing to Donald Trump and his tariff bullying, but no one was really ready. Everyone was very dependent on the dollar, and they would not move away. That changed the second Donald Trump approved that order on February 27th. I count the war. Everyone who sees, Shane, your days are one up. No, the war started when Donald Trump signed that piece of paper. It did not start when the first bomb dropped. It started when Donald Trump signed that paper. So I attribute the beginning of the war to the moment that he decided, because ultimately it's his pen stroke that approves that bomb. He started that war when he decided to sign that paper. That's why I'm a day ahead. That's why I think it's important to acknowledge who is responsible. It's not the United States. The president is the guardrail. He is responsible to advocate for the American people and their interests and their lives. And he is a traitor because precisely, and before we kind of go any farther, when we're going to be talking about this, every loss weakens our domestic safety. That weakens our deterrence. It weakens the United States' ability to protect us. Our deterrence was built on these systems, these intercept systems, these ballistic missiles that are supposed to be we're supposed to stop, big missiles from Russia. Those AWACS planes, the one that was destroyed, they were taken from Alaska. That fleet was taken from Alaska. What is their job? To protect us, give us advanced early warning for Russian ballistic missiles. That is why those things are there. They took 40% of that and they brought it to the Middle East. And now, one of 16 irreplaceable aircraft cost $300 million when it was made, and it was around the 80s or the 90s, and it's inflated to around $700 to $600 million. We can't make that. We can't replace that. We can't even make interceptors. You think we can build a whole new Boeing plane? They targeted the radar. If they had hit the front of the plane or the tail, that radar can be salvaged. That radar can be taken and moved to another airframe. No, they hit the $200 million radar on top of the plane. That plane's done. And they call it damaged. It's in two pieces. It's not damaged. It's functionally destroyed. And I'm starting to see reports that other surveillance aircraft have been hit as well. P-8 Poseidon, as well as one of the other two legacy reconnaissance aircrafts, and I'm spacing on the name. But at this point, when I see a lot of these sources I follow make this claim, they have been correct. They have been correct throughout the conflict for 31 days. I attribute this to, at least if they say destroyed, we must consider it as minimum damaged. Okay? Because there's inflation, it's propaganda. The IRGC lies just as much as the United States. But also what we're starting to see is maybe they don't need to lie as much because they're hitting it. They're hitting. Like, so the Prince Sultan strike, it was over 20 drones. They flew in, saturated the air defense. Iran launched 6 ballistic missiles. 4 got through. 4, 66% penetrated the premium, most important U.S. airbase for this entire operation. If you park that AWACS there, you believe that that airfield is safe, because that asset is essential to U.S. operations, to protecting U.S. troops like those Marines on the Tripoli, giving them the advanced early warning for a ballistic missile strike. It's not like these systems are just automatic. They can say Aegis, whatever. No, it requires someone to plot a trajectory, identify the track, and come up with what battery they want to use, what cell. We're talking about 2 to 3 minutes. Without these AWACS, we could condense that down to maybe a minute sometimes, depending where they're striking from. They have claimed since day one that IDF and CENTCOM, that 90% of their missiles have been destroyed, that they can't do anything. And now CENTCOM quietly says, we can only confirm a third destroyed. This is one of those things where we need to consider at least 10 MQ-9 Reaper surveillance drones have been destroyed, which also affects the ability for intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. There is no air superiority. I've seen tons of videos of F-18s getting shot at with man-pads. I've seen F-35s get shot at with man-pads. The tanker fleet is, at least by my own modeling, approximately 44% reduced. That is how they're getting planes into theater, because all of the bases at this point, 14 at least, according to the Wall Street Journal, I believe, are uninhabitable. Uninhabitable. Like, you can't go there. This is one of those things where we're not just talking about, oh, they took a hit or two. We're talking about them being operationally hamstrung into forcing them to use carriers and naval assets instead of U.S. basing. And that is intentional. That is highly intentional, because the Strait of Hormuz is a kill box. That is why I labeled my article yesterday the most important one that I have put out, because I have, and I confidently, based on 31 days of war, stand by my hypothesis that Iran is just waiting for the moment that it wants to make the most symbolic impact. Because I want to clarify this. Iran is hurting. It is hurting. This is painful for Iran. This is decades of damage. But Iran's calculus is not getting hurt. They want the war to stop. If they thought the United States would turn around tomorrow and leave, they would stop, because they have bigger ambitions. They want to control global energy trade in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. They want to empower China. They're taking transit fees and tolls in yen. And countries are quietly doing it because, for example, Japan gets the vast majority of its oil from the Strait of Hormuz. And not only that, the prime minister flew here to talk to Trump, to figure out how they were going to supply energy. And she said, they didn't let us know. Trump says, you didn't let us know about Pearl Harbor. She says, I am never coming to America again. This war isn't just And on top of this, they're pulling the 31st MEU. Where did they come from? They were the QRF for Taiwan. The 31st MEU was there to respond to an invasion of Taiwan. And instead, they are moved to the Middle East. And I want to say something personally. These Marines, the Tripoli is stationed originally, its home port is San Diego. The Boxer they just sent, home port of San Diego. I put out a note last night. I play Magic the Gathering with these guys. I guarantee you that I've gone to a game store and I've played with some of these Marines that are on these boats. These are 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old dudes. I put out a picture in one of my articles. You can see they still have that acne on their face that I had when I was in high school. These are teenagers. These are in their young 20s. And these are just people who just want to go and be nerds and play Magic the Gathering and get drunk. And they don't know what they're going to do. If we think that we're seeing propaganda, they don't get to choose what they're exposed to at all. And so these guys, they're all being sent into something that we as observers can clearly see as a trap. And so, you know, you said bombs first, and I kind of want us to be able to address that. But before, I want to share with you information, and I think you'll find this interesting as well, Nick, because one thing I can say, and actually the general commentary is, what is their objective? What is their strategy? What is their plan? And I spent a lot of time thinking, there is no plan. There is no plan. They are executing a bunch of different individual actions. They are reacting, not acting. It's very big. And so, Nick, I'm going to share with you the exact scale of the purge in the Pentagon. And when I get to the end of the list, it's going to make sense as to why this is so fucking dumb. So let's go back to February 2025. The first thing they do when they come into office, and heads up is confirmed, they fire General C.Q. Brown, who was the chairman of the Joint Staffs. The
Joint Chief of Staff.
Joint
Chief of Staff.
Sorry. And this is the person who oversaw U.S. modern military doctrine. There is nobody who would have been better suited to lead this war than General C.Q. Brown, because he was the guy who has been guiding and leading modern U.S. military doctrine. Who else did they get rid of? Admiral Lisa Franchetti, the chief of naval operations, fired because she's a woman.
Soon after that, we had planes falling off aircraft carriers.
Absolutely. And then 5 additional admirals and generals were removed simultaneously. They then purged all of the lawyers. All of the JAGs were then purged, and General Milley's security clearance was revoked immediately. Okay, these are the generals who in February were cut. By April, General Timothy Haw was the director of national security, and the commander of U.S. Cyber Command was fired. This is the guy who would have been focusing on the propaganda and the intelligence warfare aspect, something that they're objectively losing. The civilian deputies were removed. Dozens of NSC officials were purged. This was after Laura Loomer had a meeting with Trump. Yes, Laura Loomer.
You mean Michael Cohen's new podcast host?
Who?
Michael Cohen's new podcast host? Laura Loomer. There, we won't go into that, but that
will send me somewhere else entirely. So I'm
yeah. I just want to say this just on this point before we go away from this.
Yeah.
To me, this is really important because he's a fragile piece of shit, and Laura Loomer is one of the most disgusting human beings in the world, and is incredibly Islamophobic, and thinks that all Muslims should be killed and should be out of the U.S. She wants to purge the U.S. of Muslims, of all of the Hispanic population. If you don't remember that part, she said we need to remove 26 million people from the US. And guess what? Those 26 million people were all Hispanic that she was talking about. She's a monster of a human being.
She's a
But
monster.
anyway,
Yeah, no, you're right.
yeah. Go back to your list. And I want to make sure too, we point out most of these folks that were fired were Black or were women.
Yes. But here's where things get even crazier. By May, Hegseth ordered a 20% reduction in 4-star officers. This is the brain trust, okay? If you're a 4-star officer, decades, 30, 40 years in the service, they know war, not just war, but they know how the United States has lost. They know where it's been successful. They know where things need to be adjusted and changed. And these are the generals who would push back and say, we need to do something differently. So Hegseth purged more because they were not acquiescing. We were still seeing resistance in the Pentagon. 60,000 Pentagon civilian jobs were cut to remove bureaucratic layers, i.e., if you're not a loyalist, you're out. Let's go ahead and go even farther forward into August. The head of the Defense Intelligence Agency was fired. 2 more senior military officials were fired. The Air Force chief was forced to retire midterm. The trigger for this? That they were pushing back on the June 2025 Iranian nuclear strikes. That is what and the intelligence officer who was fired, he was the guy who said that we cannot confirm that we decimated, or what was his word, annihilated their nuclear capacity. So he was fired. Now we're going to continue to August of 2025. General Michael Kurilla, the CENTCOM commander, was relieved of his command, the man who would have been in charge of this operation. And make no mistake, this operation was planned. They had a plan for this. There's a contingency in the Pentagon. They've got a plan for everything.
Yeah, invading Iran is a plan that the US has had for decades.
Absolutely.
Decades.
Absolutely. And so he was the guy who led Operation Rough Rider and Midnight Hammer. He's the guy who had actually overseen operations in Iran in recent years. He's the guy who you need to make sure that everything is being coordinated in the Middle East properly, because he's the guy who does it. And he's just relieved. The man who built everything. And who do they replace him with? Admiral Brad Cooper, who was a deputy, and his Naval Academy, he was from 1989. Okay, he's been 30 years of leadership at best. These people they're relieving, they've got a decade or more. And he's put in mid-term, I'm not the right word, but basically, what's the term for like your duration of responsibility? Like for CENTCOM, what would that be?
Mid-station, like they changed station too early.
Okay, so he would be stationed as CENTCOM commander. So basically he
was relieved of his station changed way too early. And there are cycles for change in the military. Like they cyclically change who is at stations, specifically for officers. Officers have cyclical changes that are different than enlisted folks. Enlisted contracts tend to be by base for your contract term. Unless you're partway through and they need you to transfer to a new station. But then you typically have to sign a new contract to get new orders somewhere else. And whereas officers, they'll just send you. They'll just move you because you are signed on to your contract for a specific term. And you go wherever the fuck they want you to.
So there you go. They don't get to choose where they are, but where they are, they learn. That's also how you learn doctrine, right? That's how you learn to become a better commander. You're responsible for different regions. It's how you grow if you're in a business.
It's also why we rotate our commanders, is so that they can grow in different areas. That's why we move command teams around when their time is up. That's why they get a certain amount of time. And then a new commander and a new first officer comes in or something, or a new commander and your first sergeant come in. Brand new people. They'll do that every 2 years. You get restationed roughly every 2 years as when you're an officer. Like that's just a common thing. And it's so that you get experience in different areas so that you can effectively lead your soldiers or troops or service
Yep.
members, or sailors or airmen, airwomen, air others, everybody. That's how you do it, is you learn how to do the job by commanding a post in that job and learning
Right.
from your enlisted folks. And the best commanders do that. These folks, so I'm interrupting a little bit.
No,
These
it's good.
folks,
It's actually really good, and I want you to keep going because it's going to translate into the last kind of part where we're going
mhm,
because it really well supports kind of, and I want people to understand how important that it is that these people, the decades of experience they've had and the process, because I'm not an expert in this, and you have more knowledge than me, but it's going to support where we're going. So
yeah.
please, take
So
as much
the
time as you need to explain this
it's
before
the
we.
lack of institutional knowledge that they have. Is the command teams are really important, and the best command teams learn from their troops, learn from those who are under them. Their enlisted service members teach commanders, teach officers what to do. Most people don't remember that or don't know that or don't understand that. Is the best commanders are the ones who listen to their service members and enlisted folks, because the enlisted folks are the ones who actually do the job and are trained for the job. The command teams are trained to position those service members in the most effective positions and not get them killed. The service members, the enlisted folks, it's their job to do the actual mission. And so they
Mhm.
teach the command teams how to do it properly. These commanders that have been put into place, one, they're white nationalists and they're white supremacists, and most of them have been indoctrinated through either the Seven Mountain Mandate, or some sort of similar dominionist ideology. That's why they're put into these positions. It's a tactical choice on Hegseth's part to place sycophants, and just like Hitler had his generals who were sycophants and not good at their job, is he surrounds himself with the dumbest or the most loyal, not the most effective. And when you're in the military, you don't always want people who agree with you. In fact, the most effective commanders have someone on their staff who tends to disagree with them often, because they
Mhm.
question the orders and they say, is this the right thing to do? Should we be doing that? Why are we doing this? How come we're doing it this way? When are we doing this? What the fuck are you thinking?
Mhm.
That's the best commanders have someone at their side that say those things.
Yep.
Donald
Yeah.
Trump and his team have taken all of that away. And now
Yeah.
it's obedience over over mission command. They've taken away the one thing that we had that was actually the most effective part of our military, which is mission command, which is where every service member knows their mission and is able to take the lead of the person above them in the chain, and then they can take over in case something happens because orders filter down. Then they filter back up so that everybody understands what the fuck is supposed to be going on in that mission. And if your lieutenant or your officer dies, someone can step in. If
Right.
your enlisted senior enlisted dies, someone can step in because everybody knows the mission. That's not what's going on.
Yeah. And the point you made is so good for this next purge. And it's the last purge in my series here. And it's interesting to note that we're going to go to October. This point from these months on, I've been able to log there was 2 dozen, I believe, at least 2 dozen calls between Netanyahu and Trump in like 3 months, which is way too many. That's not normal. Okay. So October 25, Lieutenant General J.P. McGee, who is the Strategy and War Plans Joint Staff, was forced out. He had 10 combat deployments. Nick, this is the man you just described. This is the guy who understands the troops. This is the guy who knows what it means to be on the ground. What Lieutenant General James Work was designated Deputy CENTCOM Commander. He resigned because his association with Milley, when they resign, they're forced out, right? They're being forced out. Okay.
Yeah,
You can either be dishonorably discharged or you can resign. That's the offer that Pete Hegseth is making these people.
basically,
Um,
yeah.
and so the two senior leaders who have resigned after the My Way or the Highway out of Hegseth. At least 24 generals and admirals were sidelined in 9 months. Okay,
Yeah,
so
we witnessed a purge that we all saw that event, the Night of the Long Knives bullshit, where they came out and did their stupid rah-rah speech, and they told us they were going to purge the generals who did not obey or listen, or the officers or the command teams that did not obey or listen. And guess what? They did it. They just did it a lot quieter than Hitler and the Nazis did. The Nazis did it and murdered them. We just said bye and forced them all out.
unfortunately, it was the Epstein files. That's how they did it. I'll say this 100%. That is, I've been saying it. I'm not saying it's not important, but I was screaming in October about the capture of the Pentagon by Palantir. That's official. They just designated Palantir essential. It's fully integrated. There's no taking it out. They're basically building it into the Pentagon. So they fired all of the humans and they're bringing in AI. Okay. Why? Because AI will listen to them and these people wouldn't. So what's really big here, though, is what you were saying earlier, Nick, about understanding kind of how to layer operations, how to respond in a region, where to put your assets, where not to put your assets. They put a guy in who had no idea because he just inherited someone else's work. It's like picking up someone else's PhD thesis and saying, finish, they're done. So I don't know their thesis. I don't know what they were working on. I don't know how they think. I can't just finish somebody's thesis. It won't be their thesis. This was somebody else's thesis, and they're telling someone else to finish it. And so here's where, Nick, please interrupt me if something pops in your brain, because a lot of this has only lived in my head. This is not something I have, been able to share. But here's where I think the strategy now lies. And here's where I think we can see exactly how Iran is going to exploit this weakness in leadership. The United States Navy has been piecemeal surging destroyers out of Norfolk every other day for about 2 weeks. Not a resupply, not going to bases, not flying things in, not because they don't want to, because they can't. Okay, because they can't do it. They asked to use UK bases on week 1. And I said things are much worse than they are going to tell us if they are begging NATO to use bases. A lot of these European countries,
Spain closed airspace to the US,
have quietly allowed certain operations because the world is expecting the United States and Israel to finish what it started, because the last 80 years have been the US is preeminent. There is no stopping the United States. If the US is going to come for you, that's it. And the doctrine of annihilation, they have a target list. Okay, so when you go in somewhere, there's a long list of things that you can hit from the air. And the assumption was, this is my belief, that they would just bomb Iran into compliance, that they would keep hitting things until Iran says, wave the flag. But they didn't. And you got rid of the brain trust. And now you have a bunch of white nationalist idiots sitting in the Situation Room trying to figure out what to do when the entire U.S. Gulf basing structure has been annihilated. They're trying to run an air supremacy campaign with no airfields.
They're also trying to run an air supremacy campaign without some of the most supreme air assets that we have, because the Army isn't there in a lot of ways. Our Apaches are not in the air. Our Warthogs are not in the air. Our A-10 Warthogs. Not as much as they should be. Not if not if a full arm. They were supposed to be decommissioned, which I think was one of the dumbest decisions the Army ever made, because the A-10 Warthog just hear me out. I'm not a huge gun person. I don't like guns. I have my personal opinions on guns. I think people have the right to own them. I own, it's okay. But that all being said, Not going to talk about my opinion on guns and what we should be doing. The A10 Warthog. I'm an Army brat. I did not grow up on Army bases. My dad was in the Army. He and most of my family has been in the Army or the Navy at some point. We have a couple Air Force folks. We have a long tradition of military in my family. My dad is a U.S. history major and taught me about U.S. Revolutionary times and World War II. Those were his focus areas. Just like a lot of men, they focus either on cars or on history. My dad focused on history and is really good at it and knows what the fuck he's talking about. He was also a colonel in the military. He knows in the Army. He knows what the fuck he's talking about. I've experienced and seen what command can look like and should look like from a good commander who actually cared. Because my dad was fucking good at his job. The assets so going back to what we were talking about.
Warthog.
The A10 Warthog is my favorite fucking piece of equipment in the military.
The Army,
it is literally so the A10, and I don't understand why they wanted to decommission it, because it is the single most effective air tool the Army has. It is literally a Gatling gun, a gigantic fucking Gatling gun with a plane built around it. That's what it is. It is not a plane with a weapon. It is a weapon with a plane. There's a very distinct difference there. It is literally made for one thing: strafing runs. And they're fucking good at it. They're also really fucking cool to see when they do a flyover over you while you're in theater. So I'm an Army combat veteran. I went to Afghanistan in 2014. It fucking sucked. However, while I was there, I got to go out onto a place called Kop Kurwar. It was this little base that the U.S. had abandoned and the ANA had abandoned. We went back and we took it over for a couple days. While we were there, the first thing that happened was, and this has nothing to do with what we were talking about.
That's okay. This is a good little tangent, because
a good little tangent
about something that matters, because it directly applies to the safety of the troops in the region. So please continue.
And so one of the cool things that happened, one of the only really cool things that happened while I was at Kop Kurwar, other than having traumatic brain injury, because the ANA, which is the Afghan National Army, fired off howitzers about 50 meters from a truck that I was sitting in, and it's all metal, and we white it out. And if you've ever gone into a whiteout, it's fucking awful because everything just disappears. But anyway, when we got there, the first sergeant came out, and first sergeants are either really awesome or really shitty. Like, there's no in between. Right. They're like super cool or the worst fucking human being in the world.
Got it.
This guy was super cool. He came out and he walked up and he looked at the commander, not my commander. It was an infantry unit that we were tagged with for the mission. Walked up to the commander and said, "Sir, welcome." And then a fucking A-10 did a flyover over us, like 100 meters off the ground. It was the coolest thing I have.
He's like walking away from the explosion.
Oh my God. It was that moment. It was that moment, because he literally stretched his arms out and the fucking plane came. He timed it perfectly. The commander was like
promoted to the Joint Chiefs of Staff immediately.
The commander was like, "Top, that was fucking cool. Like, do that again, Top." Because if you don't know, first sergeants are called top because they are the top of the list underneath sergeant majors, but they are the top of your command structure within a typical unit. So you have your captain and your first sergeant, and they comprise your unit structure, and they are the top of that. That's why
the right-hand man, the
right-hand person
or woman.
Yeah.
Right.
And actually, some of the best first sergeants I've had, I had a couple first sergeants. Some of the best were female. Some of the worst were female, because when you're in the military, you get abused and you have to fit into the system, and that tends to leave a lot of scars. And some of the way to push back on those scars is being mean, like really mean, because it gets to them and it hurts them. It's just a thing. But some of the best leaders I've ever had, again, were women leaders. And some of the worst leaders I've had were men, because they think with the small head and not the big one.
Oh.
And all of this leads back to is like you cannot win a war by air superiority alone. And two, the war for air superiority is not won by the Air Force or the Navy. It's won by the Army and the Marines because they have more planes and helicopters than both. That's the significance of the fact that we aren't putting our best assets out there because we're not planning for this. Because we are, but the next step of this is when we put boots on the ground, is when we start seeing Army assets go out there. And that will change the scope of the war. It'll also kill a lot of people. More than likely, our service members will die in drastic numbers because of this. And I want to get your thoughts around the Karg Island piece, because I think that's a great point to come close in on as we get into our final half hour here. Is around Karg Island and what we think may be happening there. But I also wanted to give just a little bit of a quick note on a couple things that are also going on because of everything and how this all loops together into making us less safe. Is one, Spain, you were talking about NATO allies allowing U.S. Missions or Israeli missions both to go off from their bases. Mm-hmm. Spain has closed the airspace for U.S. warplanes. Mm-hmm. Spain will no longer be allowing us to fly infrastructure and support from Spanish territory. Yeah. And that's a big deal. Yep. When our allies start leaving us, that's a huge fucking deal. Additionally, the Iranians Parliament is now considering leaving the nuclear non-proliferation treaty because of this war. That will lead to a much less safe world because they will then pursue a nuclear bomb. And if they don't, another country will. Specifically, North Korea, because they won't be under the fear of U.S. supremacy anymore. They're not under the fear of the UN. They know that the U.S. is weak. They know our assets have been moved and removed. And the plan isn't for this war to end soon. No matter what they say, the plan is not to end the war because this war is a holy war. This is a crusade for them. This is not a war for U.S. supremacy. This is a war for white nationalist supremacy. And there's a difference there. And that's really where we have to draw our understanding to, is this war is not about the U.S. being supreme. It is about Christian nationalism taking dominion over the world. And to do that, they actually need to destroy Israel. They're not Israel's friend either. This war is intended to destroy Israel.
Yes, that's a huge point. And it's working.
And it's working. It's going to. It's going to.
Will work. I actually agree with you. That's a huge point. I think Israel, to use my young person speak, is cooked because it's not a matter. They are not in a position to fight the wars they've started. They expected more from the United States. The assumption is that the United States could do more, and the fact that they couldn't deliver is it for Israel, because now they're alone. They might have the United States, but they're alone, functionally alone, because the United States has proven largely ineffective to stop Iranian strikes. They cannot deal with Hezbollah. Hezbollah's attack tempo has been consistent the entirety since they invaded on March 16th. Why? Well, I can tell you it's not because they were worried about Hezbollah on the ground. It's because they don't have enough interceptors to stop Hezbollah's consistent rocket attacks and Iran's missile attacks simultaneously. It's all very, and I actually I'm going
to put on the screen I'm going to take this off. We are not showing Iranian propaganda.
This is not Iranian propaganda.
This is not Iranian propaganda about what we're about to show.
I'm still not your son.
Still not our son. Still not your dad.
I mean, you're still not you're still not their dad. So this is a great map. What I like about it is how every country is very clearly outlined. But so you'll see in the bottom there, and it's the Gulf of Aden. Okay, it's right next to Yemen and Sana'a. That's where the Houthis are. Okay, so
Right
the
here.
Houthis have controlled Sana'a since I want to say it was like mid 2020s, 2010s. They've held it for a long time. They have their own missile and drone production capacity. They are the best at what they do. They held $1 trillion in global trade hostage to the point where the United States sent a carrier group to fight them. And instead, if you remember, instead of winning, Trump came to an agreement with them. They made an agreement. They said, we'll just stop for now. They couldn't beat the Houthis. They lost to the Houthis. The Houthis are still there. The mission objective was destroy the Houthis. What did they accomplish? They made it.
They didn't.
Made a deal. It was a great deal. And so, but you see, like, let's zoom in right on the Bab el-Mandeb Strait right there. So right where Djibouti
is.
Yep, Djibouti is. And so this is
this little sliver of water right here is one of the most important shipping lanes in the world. Right next to that, hold on, let's move over. Not too far away is the other most important shipping point in the world. Right there, two of them. Right here, right here. And guess what? The Iranians control this one. The Houthis control this one.
And let's take this even farther. If you look at the Iranian response doctrine, and if you plot all this out, what Iran has done is it's gone tit for tat. Okay, you hit our nuclear plants, we bomb your nuclear facilities. You hit our energy, we hit Qatar's energy. We hit Saudi Arabia's energy. We hit your enablers. They have said to the Gulf states, if you allow attacks from the United States, we will attack you. So what did Israel do? Israel struck their steel plants with the United States, but they struck the steel plants. They turned around and hit aluminum manufacturing facilities in the UAE, I believe. It was the UAE. So it's tit for tat. It's, okay, you hit our infrastructure, we hurt the global economy. But at the same time, Iran is negotiating. It's allowing certain things through. They let Pakistani tankers through. They've allowed Chinese tankers through. They're not being, in a trade sense, they're presenting themselves as reasonable. If the GCC wants to support the United States, they will bomb them. It's interesting to note that when the Houthis launched their ballistic missiles, look at where Yemen is, and they wanted to attack Israel, which is that tiny little sliver up there. So you have to scroll all the way through Saudi Arabia to reach Israel.
Israel's right here.
Informed? Were those missiles intercepted? No. There was only 2. They could have done something. They could have alerted, but they didn't. You're seeing all the GCC states. They're playing the middle ground. Whoever has more leverage at the most critical point will essentially decide the alignment. If the United States cannot protect these bases, these countries, the GCC is going to have no choice. When I say the GCC, it's the Gulf Cooperational Council, I believe. But it's basically all of the Gulf monarchies. And they have a council where they cooperate, oil, all that stuff. But they're like the regional alliance, okay? So they all get along politely. Except now they are kind of in a tough spot, and India, okay? And guess what? Like we said, they're using the yuan. This is a big deal because it's economic pressure. But the other big thing I want to point out, because this is where it becomes tactically significant, is the Abraham Lincoln is in the Arabian Sea. Okay, so it's probably somewhere off the Gulf of Oman, near Oman, somewhere over there. Last I checked, it's somewhere around Oman, and it's launching sorties from there. The George W. Bush is on the way, and it will come with a couple destroyers. But what is Karg? Why does Karg matter? Let's talk about Karg a little bit, because Karg is the bait. Okay, this is my theory, and you're not going to like it. None of you are going to like it. But this is what I believe they are setting up. The 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, they wanted that. They want the United States to attempt to seize Karg Island. No one is really reporting this, but Iran hasn't launched a single anti-ship ballistic missile. Not one. Not a singular one. They've launched ballistic missiles. They've launched cruise missiles. They've launched rockets. They've even had a couple bombs. They even had their Air Force drop a couple bombs before it was annihilated. Pretty much, it is pretty much destroyed. Their Air Force is pretty much gone. But it was never meant to be like, that's not where they put all their money or their effort. They put all that money and effort into their missiles. When you sail a ship into the Strait of Hormuz, if you're going to seize Karg Island, you need to, one, get through the strait to reach Karg. Iran still has 5,000 to 6,000 mines it has not deployed. It's only deployed less than a dozen, I believe, at the time. They still retain 80 to 90% of their fast attack boats, which are effectively the mine layers. Okay, so that's what they have the A-10s doing, flying around, blowing up the fast attack boats. The majority of their major ships, yes, have been destroyed. That's true. But their capacity to mine the strait is more than intact. So they want the Tripoli and its MEU, which consists of several landing crafts, as well as some transports. They have F-35Bs on the flight deck. And it's not like an aircraft carrier. They can't take those resources down they're permanently on the flight deck. Okay, so they're vulnerable to something like a drone strike. Like a drone strike could hit 2 F-35Bs or a MB-22 Osprey very easily and destroy that on the deck. But once you enter the kill box, how do you get what you really want to hit? That's the question. What does Iran really want? They need something symbolic. Every single United States aircraft carrier is named after a president. They want the president. That's what they want. How do you get the president in your kill box? Well, you do something so dramatic. You strike so effectively that the only acceptable response is we have to send everything, because if we don't, we can't leave an entire MEU stranded in the Strait of Hormuz under missile fire, potentially wounded, running out of interceptors. We can't have sailors in the water. We can't. So what do? They send what they can. They send the carrier. They move the Lincoln. They move the Bush. They push it into the Strait of Hormuz or within anti-ship ballistic missile range. And then what you get is this is a reactionary move. Once you have a casualty event, a mass casualty event, worst case scenario, and unfortunately we have to consider it. We have to consider it. You have hundreds of Marines in the water. You have the USS Tripoli potentially disabled, maybe sinking, or an escort, at which point you need to send more, you need more resources. You got to get those sailors out of the water. You got to get those Marines out of the water. You can't let hundreds of troops drown. So they send what they have. Once it's in there, you mine the strait behind them. You mine it. You trap them. And then the more losses, the more chaos, it starts a casualty cascade. At which point, you don't just have one ship. You have a carrier group stranded, you have multiple vessels burning or sinking, and it just gets worse and worse. The only option is to send more or to leave them. The United States, both of our hospital ships are in dry dock. The US bases, our airfields, how are you going to evac casualties? On top of that, what if Iran says, if you treat US troops, we bomb your hospitals? That's exactly what I would expect Iran to do. Because their angle is deny the United States the regional support, force them to depend on the Navy for air operations, for any kind of amphibious invasion. They need to depend on the Navy. If they do that, they get what they want. And that's Karg. Karg is the bait. They want them to try and take Karg. They knew that that was the only reasonable leverage the United States could attempt to get on short term. And that, unfortunately, is when the Viper strikes. That is the moment the Viper strikes. And suddenly, they've held every single anti-ship ballistic missile in reserve. Once you have everything packed in there, and you've got 30 seconds, 45-second intercept windows, and you've got dozens of anti-ship ballistic missiles. And let me tell you something about these Houthi missiles. These missiles are harder to intercept because most ballistic missiles, they're going to do a big arc for you. Okay, they're going to go up, they're going to cruise, and they're going to come down really fast. Now, the missiles the Houthis have developed, they do this. They are hard to intercept. These are ballistic missiles that are made specifically to counter a Patriot battery, to counter a PAD battery, to get around the problems. They've been learning the whole time. And my biggest concern is that they will use this ineptitude of our current Pentagon leadership and the reactionary style of response. Instead of sending a resupply to a base, you send more destroyers because you can't replenish your air defense capacity. Your armory and your reserves are already low. And the only real option, if you're just thinking reactionally, is send more ships because we don't have bases. So we have to send ships. And this is, cronyism and an idiocracy in the Pentagon. This is what that looks like. This is what I would expect Pete Hegseth to say. Send them all. Send them all. Peace through strength. This is what an idiot claiming peace through strength looks like. They want to surge a third of our active fleet into the Strait of Hormuz. They want to somehow facilitate a ground invasion, which, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but I don't even see a functional way. And they have actually moved a couple armored brigades from the Army quietly into the region. They have several of the roll-on, roll-off major bulk carriers that carry tanks, Bradley's M1s. They're in the region. But they can only be offloaded in certain places.
Yeah.
Right. Why is Kuwait so important? Kuwait has been hammered. Look at where Kuwait is on that map. Let's zoom in. Exactly.
Well, let me switch over real quick. Actually,
you get a better one.
This tab.
This
is the IranWarLive.com.
Yeah, this is this is great. So if we zoom in,
look at here where there was a missile strike on a desalination plant. This is Kuwait. Right here, right next to Iran. They're very close. They're very easily targeted. They're within missile range and strike range. So this is a problem for them. And it's a heavy area that's been hit because guess what? Kuwait has some major U.S. bases that have been there forever at this point. And they are a regional ally of ours. And they're going to get hammered. So just wanted to... Shane, continue on what you were talking about, but I wanted to pull up this map because it's kind of neat. I just found it, and it's got strike indicators on medium. It gives actual confidence score on high, medium, or low confidence. It's got us telling us how many casualties there possibly were, what happened. So a missile was fired in this location, single source, treat with caution. great. That's a great little piece of info from this tool. Like, find tools. I just found this. Like, find tools like this that help show you what is going on. And let me put it with the satellite terrain so we can see what Kuwait looks like right here. And this is pretty much where it's getting attacked.
That
right
port
in this
right there,
little
that's
area.
really important. What you're looking at, those ports right there, because you can drive up these very big ships, okay? And you have to unload each tank one at a time. It takes a long time to get an entire brigade of armor off of a ship onto the ground. Now, if you want to conduct a ground invasion with troops, you need to get those tanks on the ground. You want it to be the shortest possible distance to get those resources there. Kuwait is that place. Kuwait has been bombed to hell, like just absolutely bombed. They are getting hit by everything. They are putting a lot of pressure on Kuwait, but it's because if you look at that map, how close they are. If the U.S. is going to surge tanks, it's going to be through Iraq, which is actually so underreported. The Iraqi militias are
we haven't talked about the Kurds or anything like that in a while.
Yeah, and the U.S. is now bombing some Kurdish groups as well. So there's because they just are just indiscriminately being very stupid. But like they're friends and they're allies. But you either attack through Iraq, okay? Like, and they've been asking Iraq for their bases back quietly, but they want to use the bases again. But the Iraqi militias, and if you watched beforehand, there was a ton of pressure on the Iraqi's prime minister election. Iraq had a big power exchange coming up, a transition of power. Iran was lobbying to have a Iraqi affiliated group in power. The United States was pressuring for a United States friendly government. Well, unfortunately for the United States, the Iraqi militias there, Kataib Hezbollah, as well as some other groups, are conducting FPV strikes. Some of you may have seen the video of a radar being destroyed and then a Black Hawk being destroyed at Camp Victory or maybe it's like Victoria. It's one of and so we have video they publish of them destroying these things. So Iraq is not an option either. You can't invade from Iraq because you can't get the troops in. Okay, you can't get troops into Kuwait because you have to park the ship in the harbor, and you're parking billions of dollars of armor on a boat within ballistic missile range with zero wear time and likely little to no response capacity if what we're seeing in terms of U.S. base damage is true. They are preparing for a ground invasion that to me is logistically impossible. It's not functionally possible, and it plays into this idea of a bunch of idiots reacting in what they think is the most politically, politically reasonable, or they're just doing something to do something.
Yeah.
Send Marines. What Marines? Those Marines are available. Those Marines are available. Send Marines. Send more ships. If you're going to send a battle group or something, right? You're going to want to send those ships out together. You're going to want to assemble that group. You're going to want to make sure that the supply vessels are with the destroyers and that the food carrying vessels with them, and they're all together. Instead, Norfolk is like a revolving door. You just keep seeing things come and go. It's not normal. They took two of the US's newest landing dock ships straight out of the shipyard after sea trials. Very abnormal. Sent them to the Middle East. This is all very abnormal. This is grab what you can and send it over there and we'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. That's the plan. And that is extremely alarming. And that should cause everyone tremendous concern for the lives and safety of our troops. Because this is what D-Day took 6 months of planning, 6 months of troop massing, of deception, of tricking the Germans that they were doing something else. And they did all of that. And it was very costly. And the Nazis didn't have ballistic missiles. They had machine guns and bunkers. Not only does Iran have all of those things, they have one-way attack drones. They have naval drones. They have ballistic missiles. They have anti-ship missiles. They have, and I personally believe that if I'm Iran, I hold a third to 2/3 or half of my mobile launchers in the tunnel system that I designed them to be hidden in. And I give them the impression that I am out of missiles and that on day one, I fired all of my missiles because I'm silly and I'm, brown and I don't know how to do anything. And US doctrine is so strong and powerful that we're just going to get destroyed. But no, they fired a bunch of missiles they didn't expect to hit at volume to deplete interceptors. And what's even crazier is they did that and they still achieved catastrophic damage in the first retaliatory waves. So we know that because the Pentagon straight up told the satellite companies, the commercial satellite companies in San Francisco, to put a 14-day delay on all satellite footage. That's crazy. That's very odd. Like, this is like, don't share what's going on.
I do. Well, let me push back just
time.
on that for a second. There is precedent for asking communications companies to delay reporting and delay producing imagery. That's just in my eyes, that's a standard wartime tactic, because that's doctrine to ensure that operational security is met, OPSEC, so that we aren't getting real-time images like we do from the Chinese, let's say, of where our troops are, of where our planes are. And the problem is we're in a society now where that real-time imaging cannot be controlled.
Correct.
And two, I want to point out too, while we're talking about this and getting into this area, let's go back to Kuwait just for a second. Here's please. Kuwait. Here's Karg Island. This little island. This is what we want to take. This tiny fucking little island that is just an oil manufacturing plant. And
they just load up oil.
They just load up oil. They want to take this. Okay. Kuwait is on this side of the Gulf. And this is the Persian Gulf right here in this area. Karg Island is right next to the mainland of Iran.
They have to go in so far.
It is not a good staging area either for the U.S. Because guess what? It's full of fucking flammable shit that's just going to get blown up if we go there, and it's going to blow up our service members. This is not a strategic foothold. What this does is this puts our service members closer in range to ballistic missiles. This puts our ships in range and easy targets for ballistic missiles.
That's rockets. That opens up rockets, right?
That also opens up the northern part of Iran to then begin firing. Because Iran will fire over Iran without a problem. And they'll use weapon systems that are in regions that are outside of our normal operating procedures. And they will shoot from, say, closer to Afghanistan or Turkmenistan. They'll shoot from on this side. They won't fire from right here, right next to Karg Island, because they know that's stupid. The Iranians aren't dumb. They've been wargaming this. Somebody said in the chat too, is we've been wargaming it, but Iran has been wargaming this too.
Yes.
They know what the strategic points are, and they know that certain places are strategic outliers that aren't really as important as they come off as. Karg Island, yes, is important, but it's not as important as owning the Strait of Hormuz.
They said they blow it up. If the US
Iran would rather blow it up than let us take it. And that means they've wargamed it out. That means they're prepared to do it. And when they do it, it's going to cost a lot of lives if we decide to land troops there. And it's not a good staging area. It is a place for sitting ducks and for our service members to die. And like troop carriers, these sorts of offboarding ships for the Navy, or the Marines, where they offload real quick and they take over a place, because the Marines are the first strike force. They always have been, they always will be. That is our strike force. Our first landing parties are always the Marines.
Yep.
When we open up into a full land war, the Marines are always first in, last out. Always. That's history since the Marines have been a thing. They will land and they would get decimated because Iran will blow them up. Yeah. Question. Before we get to the end, because we're at the top of our
today.
Let's wind ourselves down and close out. Yeah, go ahead, Shane. You got a good question.
This is my last question for you. If I'm Pete Hegseth, if I'm a room full of idiots and I'm trying to figure out how to do things, and I don't really know any military doctrine, military history, what's the most iconic U.S. operation to ever occur in the history of the United States?
Well, that really does depend, but I'm assuming you're talking about D-Day and the storming of Normandy Beach and
they think they're going
loss of lives.
I think they think they're going to land a bunch of troops in Iran and seize an airfield and then surge a bunch of assets in and find a way to open up a highway for their tanks. And because they're dumb and they don't know anything and they grew up on the curated World War II success propaganda, and they think that otherwise, why would they take those two landing vessels right off the production line? We have so much context. The way you figure out what they're doing is a force exists to execute a certain plan. You assemble a strike group, you assemble an army to achieve an objective. Based on the composition of that force, you can retroactively go back and say, what does this force do? The force they are assembling is for an amphibious landing operation. That is what they are doing. They are bringing destroyers. Why? Because the operational plan is you send in destroyers, you bombard with tomahawks, you hit the beach, you suppress, you send Marines, they get a beachhead, and you secure that beachhead. Now,
and then the Army follows suit once the Marines establish a beachhead. Yes, exactly. That is typically how it goes. It's Iwo Jima, it is Normandy, it is all of these types of actions. Yes, that is an effective way to gain a foothold on the ground. The reason we do it, there's a reason other countries have done it too in wars, is that exact idea. It is effective. It also costs a lot of lives. It costs a lot of lives because we don't have the bases anymore. We gave up our bases in Afghanistan. We left Afghanistan all by itself. Afghanistan, for those who are looking, is right here.
Yep.
It has this entire border with Iran. If we actually had wanted to invade Iran and, do a full regime change and whatever bullshit, had we actually wanted to do that correctly, we should have never left Afghanistan, because Afghanistan offered us the pathway into Iran. Iraq doesn't. Yes, it shares a border.
Mm-hmm.
But the Iraqis have been much more hesitant to and resilient towards, or resistant at times, than here. I wish that had the names of the countries when they were in.
You'll have to send the link
satellite view.
That's one of the best ones I've seen. I've looked at a lot of them. It's great.
But right here, this is Afghanistan. It's on the Hindu Kush Mountains. It is beautiful. By the way, this side of Afghanistan, fucking amazingly beautiful. You go out there at night and you can see all the stars you could ever imagine. Like, there's no light pollution. You have to be willing to risk dust pollution. Actually, no, the best way to do it is wear a set of night vision goggles, the nods, because that illuminates. So nods actually, for those who don't know, night vision goggles, the reason they work so well is they illuminate things in the dark. They illuminate light much better. So if you put a light filter on and you illuminate the stars, you get to see like 2 or 3 times deeper into the starfield. Ask me how I know. I did it in the middle of the fucking night while sitting and manning a 50 cal pointed at the Afghan National Army sitting across from us on a base because we didn't trust them because they would kill us and we would kill them. Like, just, it's beautiful there. But had we actually wanted to win a strategic war in this area, had we actually planned this, somebody pointed out in our chat, Paul, the storming of Normandy planning was like 1.5 to 2 years of planning.
6 months to get the troops. But to his
Yeah.
point, the plan
But the plan was solid. Had we had a plan, we would have continued our alliances and forged alliances in Afghanistan. We would have further forged the alliances in Iraq, and we would have created a war front that could press from both sides. But we didn't, because we're stupid, because we abandoned that, because Donald Trump left Afghanistan. Not Joe Biden. Joe Biden finished that, but Donald Trump initiated it. He was the one who treated with ISIS and with the Taliban, and who gave concessions and allowed our service members to die as we were pulling out of the country, because he did it. Donald Trump made that plan. Joe Biden had to stick with it. He couldn't get out from it. He could have done things better, yes. At the same time, Donald Trump is the reason we have all of this shit going on. Like, Donald Trump is the problem.
And if you guys have an extra minute, I want to share something that I learned with you, because things right now suck. It's just, it is. But I learned something the other day I thought was really cool. And so I shared an image with Nick, and this is really interesting. And it's about the United States, and it says a lot about our geography. And I think it's really cool. So what are you looking at? 70 million years ago, there was an ocean that went straight through the United States, from the Arctic all the way down to what you see is the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh, hey, look, it's Florida.
And there's Florida. Sea level rise. Should we be concerned? You tell me.
Don't worry about it.
You tell me. But this is really cool, because it says a lot about why we find fossils. For all of the, archaeology, pseudo-archaeologists, there's like, why is there a fish in Utah? Because there was an ocean 70 million years ago. And it went all the way
right about there.
Yeah. The Utah salt flats. That's why. Because it was an ocean. And you have this residual water that was trapped and eventually evaporated, leaving the salts.
Oh, sorry.
And I just think, I just learned this the other day. And I think it's so cool, because everyone, who says, the climate, the world is in not the best place. But I say this because Earth is pretty remarkable. It's pretty cool. And it's there's gonna be a challenge for us to survive. And that's up to us, whether we come together as communities and people and do the things we need to do to help ourselves. But I think the world is just meant to change. Like, there's no, it's not going to stay the same. There is no, general normal. There is just all of these wacky, weird configurations. And this is 70 million years ago. This is the dinosaurs. This is all of these crazy things, all of these different organisms. And if you ever want to go out, if you're near Utah, you can walk out your back door, and pretty much Arizona, Utah, Wyoming, up into Montana, all of this is there for you to find. Like, go hunt some fossils. Go find some fossils. Go find something unique. Go touch some grass, or go dig in some dirt. Find something cool, and learn something today. It's like learning about something is so exhilarating, to know something you didn't know yesterday. And I hope you thought this was as interesting as I found it, because it's just so wild to see how our planet has changed and how everything has had to adapt, and that we are really lucky to have this planet to live on, and that we're really lucky to have the opportunity to understand and learn about it. So, let's end on a note that's not, unfortunately, not war. And instead we'll end on go learn instead.
Yeah, go learn. Part of this
we'll
too
keep you
is
updated.
we want to keep you guys informed, but also give you guys some fun stuff at the end. I just sent Shane another map, and I think this is one that he maybe has seen before. This one actually has naval ship locations too plotted on it. It's called the Iran strike map. I'll make sure for everyone in the audience, we will include all the maps that I've displayed. Plus the other one will include I'll include the image that Shane had sent me at first with the outlines of the nations in the area. And I'll make sure to send both of the Iran War Live and Iran Strike Map web pages because these are OSINT reporting. This is where we get our information from.
This is what we
and
do.
Then where we validate it and we check. This is why I looked at this and I said, okay, now there's two maps that I can look at, and we can compare between those two maps and see, is there differences? Are there different? Where are the differences? How come there are differences? Why is the strike being reported on this one but not on this one? That gives us better information for y'all. And we want to make sure you guys are prepared, because that's knowledge is half the battle, and then applying that knowledge is the other half. So we're giving you the knowledge so that we can apply it to make sure that we have a fucking country to stay for, to live for. Like I want to live in a US where Iran doesn't scream death to America, because we have exported love and compassion and products of good rather than products of hate and destruction. We can change the legacy of the US.
We can make amends.
Just like this map here on our screen shows how the US used to be entirely different geologically than it is today. That's a metaphor for how we can change the direction of our country. That can be used as a metaphor for our country. It doesn't have to look like this anymore. It doesn't have to look like what it used to. We can evolve and move forward, and that's what we want to do. So before we get to, or as we get to sharing our QR code so that we can promote ourselves and unabashedly promote ourselves in the work that we're doing, is, before I say that, is, sorry, I got off there for a second, is use this knowledge and use this. I'm tired, man. It's been,
dude, I get it. I get it. Sleep is
my
something
brain is
that
hurting.
You're not getting a lot of right now. So you got to forgive us for being a little.
And so use this, because this can drive us moving forward. This can drive change. OSINT is the way to get there. Open source intelligence gathering, verified OSINT, where such as people like Shane Yirak down here, who does the Firebrand project and his OSINT analysis, which is our spot on. His analyses are spot on, are really strong. I value Shane's work a lot. And so he does that, and he gains y'all's truth through using these resources. And so we're going to share the resources too that we use, that we can share. Like if they're public resources that are available for others to see, we're going to let you know so that you have the best information and you can verify that we're telling you the truth.
Yeah.
And so
it's like,
go support the fuck out of this man right down here. Go support the fuck out of him. He's been exploding in a good way. And yes, Shane, I know you may talk about this for a second. I know it's a double-edged sword feeling because you're reporting on war and people are listening. Do not take that as a negative. Do not let it get to you that it sucks that people are following you just because of war. No, they're following you because you're putting out real information, and they trust that what you're putting out is accurate and valuable.
Yeah. Thank you. And I kind of told Nick beforehand is, It is. It's a double-edged sword. I've seen a ton of growth. We've done almost 1,000 subs, free subs in like a month. Like, it's huge. We've surged in terms of paid subscribers. We broke 250 the other day. The amount of you guys who have come out and donated at the Buy Me a Coffee and all of that, it keeps me going because I can tell you guys I'm tired. I'm really tired. It's going to get harder and it's going to get worse. But I will say this, my commitment to you is that I'm going to give you the best picture of this war that I can, that I will not let them lie to you. I will not let them exaggerate. I will not let them kill and get our soldiers killed without you knowing, because you deserve it. Beyond that, thank you to everyone all over the world, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, for trusting me to get you guys the right information. Thank you, because I serve citizens of democracy. I serve people who want a better, democratic, humane world. Intelligence, information is a human right. Knowing what's going on around you, if it's available to you, is something you deserve. And I'm going to keep doing that. And for those of you who understand that, yeah, I've had to drop a lot of things. I've tracked conflicts around the world. But I get that information from someone who's doing what I'm doing now. And I aggregate that. What I'm doing is different. What I'm doing now is grabbing what's happening right now and trying to give that to you. And that means less lives. That means pausing things that I was doing. That means committing to the job I'm doing right now, which is making this war visible. And that's what I will continue to do. I'm working on resources so I can share my resources with you. And I'm working, even Nick, one of the things I'm going to be able to do here very soon is get on a broad banner, and I'll actually be able to push out this information on a wider scale. So there's ways we can amplify this, but the best thing you guys can do is go and read these reports I'm putting out daily. I give you critical takeaways. I'm not saturating you. I'm not giving you everything. I want you to know what to walk away with today and why it matters. And that's what I'm offering. That's what I really am going to keep doing. And I'm just so grateful to everyone for having my back, for supporting me financially when the amount of effort this takes. I joked to my fiance, I understand why the Pentagon has a staff now, because this shit is crazy hard. It's a lot. It's a lot. And, missiles are falling from the sky right now. And we have to go and grab these things. So if you subscribe, I'm going to be a resource to you. I want you to know that if you read my work, you're going to be able to take that work and share that with others, because I want to be a resource for citizens of democracy, more important, citizen journalists. I want you to have somewhere to go to get information. If you ever want more resources, if you ever want more information, you can message me, and I have a source library of every single article I've read, everything I've referenced. So if that's something you want or you need, now I can't include it in every article because they would be 12 years long. But I have them. And I also just want to say, if you want more information, please reach out to me, ask, and I will try and make those resources available to you as well. So thank you very much. I know that was long-winded, but this conflict, I would rather not report on it. I would rather be talking about other things. I would rather not be I would rather those 6 soldiers who were National Guard reservists out there manning a radar, I'd rather they be home with their families. I'd rather they be alive. I'd rather the hundreds of children in Lebanon, in Iran, and all these countries, I would rather they be alive. But thank you for supporting me doing this anyway. And know that I'm not in this for money. I don't care about the growth. I would rather this world be peaceful and us not have to report on this. But as long as it's going on, I will continue to serve you guys in that capacity. So thank you. Please support me. Paid subscriptions, donate, buy me a coffee. A free subscription is always enough, because that way you're taking this information, you're getting it out there. So if you read, my ask is to report. Read and report. You don't need to have your own publication to report. You have a circle and a community that you can serve with this information. I encourage you to do so. So with that said, Nick, let's talk about Nick, because Nick is one of the best humans I've met. Nick has been through a lot. Nick is outspoken. Nick is a networker. Nick is a person who doesn't take shit, and he stands up for his friends, and he is committed to a culture and fighting the roots of a lot of the evil, which is the misogyny and the white nationalism. And he puts on shows that are good for the soul. We need Nick. We need people like Nick, because when things are dark and hard, we need people like Nick to remind us of our humanity. And Nick does that really well. And make sure you go and support Nick. Like, let's make Nick like pop off. Like, same thing. Like, we need Nick as much as we need open source intelligence, because they're both important. We need human intelligence. And that's
that was my job once.
And that's exactly what he's good at. So support him in that. Support Nick. Go subscribe to Sick of This Shit publications. Because I can tell you, we're sick of this shit. We're all sick of this shit. Bring the troops home. No more war. Stop it. No war. This is not what anybody asked for. This is not okay. This cannot be allowed to happen. And voices like Nick's are important to remind us of that human aspect. Is we need to bring these people home. They're not soldiers. They're people. We need to bring them home. We need to get them out of harm's way. We need to stop this regime. And what Nick is doing is a huge, important part of that. Please support him.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate that. And we need to, one of the things too, I'm an Army combat veteran, and there's a very big difference between supporting the troops and supporting the war. Never, ever, ever, ever let anyone tell you that supporting the troops means you have to support the war. Mm-hmm. That is false. Supporting the troops means keeping them safe, keeping them out of harm's way, ensuring that we are not creating harm's way, which we're doing now. And we're making ourselves less safe because of it. And part of the problem, the reason we're doing that, is because toxic fucking masculinity and Christian nationalism have taken over in the States. And I fucking hate that shit. And I'm here to push back against it. And I'm a disabled veteran. And so I advocate for my disability community and those who are disabled like myself. I advocate for men's health and fixing masculinity because it's fucking broken. Mm-hmm. Specifically, white men, we are broken because we have been taught not to feel and that we need to be fucking robots and destructive. And we got to fix that. We got to break it. And we're going to break that cycle. That's what Sick of This Shit publications is all about. Because like Shane said, I'm done being sick of the shit. So we're doing the shit. And we are doing a lot. We've got some incredible interviews lined up. Still continuing to have incredible interviews lined up. A lot of really good work that I'm doing. I put out a new post this weekend on the commitment to community, which is part of the Intelligent Masculinity series. So please go read that if you can, and like, share, restack it, subscribe. Paid subscriptions really help. They keep the lights on and pay for things to be able to do this and build the tools that we're working on to be able to build things like broadband or pages where we can influence AI models and push our stuff out onto platforms that are unexpected. Like Shane said, he's going to be getting onboarded soon. That's going to push a lot of content into AI models that could feed in a really positive way. So we're building those tools using Sick of This Shit publications and Banner and Backbone. Banner and Backbone, obviously, that's where we're at right now. You guys are here with us, supporting us. It's incredible that you're here listening to the conversation and being a part of the discussion with
for
it.
2 hours,
with us.
Sat here and listened to us talk. So thank you. Because
thank you.
There's a lot of folks out there who talk for hours, but you chose to listen to us for 2 hours. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys, all of you, more than you know. It's really incredibly helpful. Free or paid subscriptions both really help. Just the biggest thing you can do is like, stack, and reshare, and send it and forward it to your friends. If you can afford to be a paid subscriber, that would be wonderful. If you can't, be a free subscriber. We don't paywall anything.
No,
So you're not getting extra content for being a paid subscriber. You're helping us keep the lights on, and you're helping us build something that can last, because we're in the new media sphere. We're not independent media, we're new media. We're new media that's bringing the truth, cares about what you do, and we're not following the old rules of we have to be fucking fair to both sides. Both sidesism got us here because that's false equivalencies. We don't play in false equivalencies, we don't do that shit, and we're not here for it. So I'm I appreciate all of you for being a part of this, for joining us every week, for coming back for our Palantalks. We're on episode like 36 or something. Like, we've been doing this for a while. Shane and I have gotten to listen and know and share this time with y'all. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for joining us. If you're new here, please hit the subscribe and join myself, Shane, Yirak, and Banner and Backbone. Become part of our community. Come back next week. We'll be back again at 1 p.m. Eastern, like we are every week for Palantalk here on Banner and Backbone, because this is Palantalk, where we like tech.
no fascism.
Thanks, y'all.